Kendall McNabney lecture. It's a distinct pleasure to have Dr. Cheryl Hare on with us today from Emory University. So this is obviously our campus, and we've grown quite a bit over the years, and I think that you know, certainly the way that things look now pictured here are not how they've always looked. So this is the old General Hospital that was, you know, just a block or so away from here right now. And we got some fabulous press back in the day. And I would say that we're still a pretty tough act to follow. We have a few conveniences, but we have at least 2 doctors on duty at any one time. So that's still true most of the time, you know. Obviously, you know, the rooms are a little nicer than this nowadays. And then here's the young Dr. McNabney answering a radio call. So that thing looks like the size, you know, of a small room. So the radio's gotten a little smaller. He's very fashionable. I do appreciate the bright orange shirt and tie. So here's Dr. McNabney getting some press describing emergency medicine. As you all are aware, he founded our department. He was the chair of emergency medicine from 72 to 86. He founded our residency program. He served as the president of what was then the University Association of EMS, which is now SAEM, and he served on the board of directors from ABIM. So Dr. Grattan has included this quote previously, and I think that it fits very well, and have chose to leave it in this presentation. And that's when the effective leader is finished with his work, the people say that it happened naturally. And I think that for those of us that knew Dr. McNabney, we would all say that this is right on point in describing him. And then I think this is also another quote that sums up how he approached teaching, and that you know, the mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, and the great teacher inspires. And I think he did that well. So here's Dr. McNabney inspiring. This is over here in the medical school somewhere, because I recognize that podium and mic. That may be this current one. And so here's a collage of past classes. Some of you will recognize yourselves in here. So this goes back. This is I forget who this is here, but
Phil Barnes.
Phil Barnes. He dressed up well for his picture. Here's some more classes moving forward. This class, they decided to apparently go to Mount Rainier to get their photo done. So not sure what happened with them.
Wow.
Here's.
It's amazing.
So I think that gets us there. And then here's Dr. McNabney enjoying a nice cold beer, which he certainly deserved, and his lovely wife, Elaine. So, and that takes us to our guest speaker. So it gives me distinct pleasure. Hold on, not yet. Not yet. It gives me distinct pleasure to have Dr. Cheryl Hare on here today. She is the Vice Chair and Professor of Emergency Medicine at Emory University. She's also the Associate Dean and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Emory University School of Medicine. And I've known Cheryl for quite a while. You know, I went and did my Tox Fellowship at Emory and started there back in '05. And, you know, moving to Emory was quite a, you know, big deal for me, because I went to school here, I did my residency here, and so that was kind of the first time that I got out and saw something different. And to go from our department, which is you know, a small to medium-sized department, to Emory, which had over 100 faculty. It had a crazy large residency program, covered multiple hospitals. I was like, wow, this is the big time. And I met a lot of awesome people, and you were one of those people that I, right off the bat, realized, you know, you knew what you were doing, and I paid attention to whenever you were speaking and what you had to say. So, and then we had the fortune of taking the chair development course together a few years ago and got to catch up then, and so that's been great. So, but Dr. Heron got her bachelor's degree in biology and psychology from Tufts University, and then went on to get her master's in public health. And then she followed that with her doctorate of medicine from Howard University. She completed her emergency medicine residency at Martin Luther King Jr. and Charles Drew Medical Center in Oakland, and then she moved to Emory, where she completed an injury control fellowship in the Department of Emergency Medicine. You have worn quite a few hats in your lifetime. So she's been a full professor of emergency medicine since 2014, and then she has served as both assistant and associate residency program directors. She served as assistant dean of medical education and student affairs at the medical school. She followed that with associate director for education and training in the Injury Prevention Center at Emory, and subsequently became vice chair of administrative affairs within the Department of Emergency Medicine, and she's currently the vice chair of faculty equity engagement and empowerment, as well as the associate dean of community engagement, equity, and inclusion. You know, looking at her CV, it's pretty impressive with the amount of service that she's done. She has been a chair of numerous committees and organizations and served in multiple leadership positions, both within Emory, regionally within the state of Georgia, as well as within SAEM and other multiple national societies. And she has over 40 international and national presentations, over 50 publications, and has received multiple honors, you know, from the state of Georgia, I couldn't even list them all here, so I just had to include a couple. But needless to say, she's gotten multiple accolades for the work that she's done. And so I found this is my last slide, I promise. So, I found this was from an essay that was published in the Emory Magazine. Is that what it was called? Emory Magazine? So this was penned by Dr. Heron, describing her experience living through COVID, and kind of also some of the struggles dealing with equity related to care that was available during COVID. And I think that I really particularly liked this representation of you, and I look forward to hearing what you have to share with us. So,
Dr. Ogren, thank you, sir.
Yeah. All right, so please, join me in welcoming Dr. Heron.
So before I get started, and want to thank, can I call you Adam? It feels kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Cheryl is my name, Cheryl Heron. And before I get started, I just want to, who's graduating? Can y'all stand up? Stand up. So this is why we're here. This is why I do what I do, and I want to congratulate you, notwithstanding what we've seen with matching in EM, the future, because you are the future, right? And I hope and believe and always co-sign on the fact that when we all become patients, and we will, whether it's ourselves or our family members, we want to see people we trust, and we want to see people who know what they're doing, right? So I'm hoping and have every confidence that you are those people. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for engaging. I'd also like to acknowledge the good Dr. Vogel. She reminded me that we worked together, and I won't let her say what year, but I do want to say, I live my life around joy and gratitude, and always have learned to say thank you for every experience that I have, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we all learn from them. So thank you, Adam, for that. So today, the title here is, the lens towards equity and inclusion, one woman's story, what's yours? Really, my story is part of the journey. Your story is the rest of the journey, because we do this together. And when I was asked to speak to honor Dr. Kendall McNabney. I was like, wow, that's pretty, it touched me, right, for lots of reasons. First of all, I don't know him. And so for somebody to ask you to do a lecture in honor of someone that you don't know, that's a lot of responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. And I pulled out some things and read about him to prepare for this, and I noted that he graduated in 1962. Incidentally, that was the year I was born. I do look well for my age, thank you. He was drafted to the Army in 1968. I'll tell you a little bit more about that significance as it relates to my life. I will also say we just honored our veterans and those who served on Memorial Day. He founded the EM residency, so you all are part of his legacy. He chaired emergency health services, as you heard. As a dean of GME, I also worked in GME as an assistant dean for a little while. He was president of SAEM. I was a founded president of ADIM. And one thing that struck me the most is, as a member of the Presbyterian Church of Kansas, I was confirmed in a Presbyterian church in Brooklyn. So I say all that to say that on looking at Dr. McNabney, presumably a white male, not sure of his gender identity, but I would imagine cisgendered since he has a wife, we have probably nothing in common when you look at me as an African-American woman, and I'll tell you more about who I am in just a moment, but we do have the ethos of just being good people, to do great things in emergency medicine. So I am honored to actually be a part of his narrative going forward. I have no disclosures, but I do have a personal disclosure, is that I am an immigrant born in Jamaica. I put the flag there because some people think it's Jamaica Queens. And so I want to make the distinction, it's Jamaica the country. And who can tell me anything about the Jamaica flag that makes it unique? What about it? This is a call and response thing. So this is the only flag in the world that has no red, white, or blue in it. I don't know if that's just some random fact. I don't know, it's just, I found it interesting. But Jamaica's culture is out of many one people, meaning Jamaicans look like me, look like you, and we are grounded in the patois, the jerk chicken. Angie knows I make the best jerk chicken in Atlanta. And I'm also very much family-oriented. That's my family there. I always honor my parents, who have been amazing mentors to me, and I'm a strong woman of faith. Now, 1968, I already mentioned the significance of that, right? So who can tell me what happened April 4th, 1968? Anyone? Right, so Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated April 4th, 1968. What is the relevance of that for me is now I live and work in Atlanta, the birthplace and resting place of Martin Luther King Jr. So ironically, the story of my parents coming to Jamaica in 1968 and me now working in Atlanta, where Martin Luther King now rests, I think somehow has coined and brought all of my life together in this space. The picture represents my dad's 80th birthday. They are now deceased, unfortunately, both of them, but they have been an anchor and a rock for my life. So today we're really gonna discuss, why diversity, equity, and inclusion, wellness, and sort of well-being from my lens, a leadership lens, but I would invite you to think about it from your lens, because diversity for me means everyone, and equity and inclusion is really what we're talking about. I'm gonna challenge you to leave with at least 2 strategies to advance equity and inclusion, in whether it's individually, community, collectively. And I want you to think about, especially graduates, how are you gonna get to your true north, right? What does that really look like? I will absolutely say, while I graduated residency in 1996, Centennial Park bombing was my first night shift. And I know, right? I know some of y'all were probably, I'm not gonna go there if you were on the planet, but that was my first night shift as a faculty member. And I can categorically say I still enjoy emergency medicine. And while we know we have this discordant way on how we look at the specialty, right? Work hard, play hard, but then have the worst burnout in history, it is incumbent on all of us to really find our true north. So maybe 26, 27 years later, like me, you can still say you enjoy what you do. So this is my journey. I won't work you through all of it, but some pivotal points coming to Emory, right? Grady, I already mentioned the historical import. I was the first African-American woman in 1996 to be hired on faculty by Art Kellerman. which I found at least striking for me personally, because I said, wow, okay, this is Atlanta, it is the Mecca. And that really has been the foundation for how I sort of ended up here. We were a division under surgery, sort of like this program was sort of surgery. And Dr. Kellerman got us to become a department founding chair in 1999. And I became an associate residency director, so I got involved in GME. And at that point, it really begged the question for me for why does it matter? Why does it matter that I don't see many people who look like me? And I started to publish voraciously about this and bring it to the attention of the Council of Residency Directors. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. In 2007, another great year, notwithstanding you did graduate from fellowship, Adam, I think that was the year you graduated, if I heard you correctly. I started to delve deeply into Emory University, serving as the president for the Commission on Race and Ethnicity for the university, where pivotal for me, we were able to have the Board of Trustees issue a statement of regret for the role Emory played in enslaved people, which was an incredible milestone, incredible opportunity for restorative justice. I also became an assistant dean that year in student affairs, so I was in residency, GME, now student affairs. I got accepted into ELAM, which is an executive leadership and academic medicine program for women. But most importantly for me, I got married. And my husband, Boniface, if you know him, we're so opposite. People say, how did you, what happened there? He doesn't talk. People doesn't think he does, but he does talk. But Angie's met him a couple times. In fact, he got married, I think that we got married the year you left us, I think, in 2007. And he has been a staunch supporter. Why? Because I intermingle how one stays well with one's personal life. For years, Boniface thought that Journal Club was a date, because that's how we got fed. When I didn't, have the time to cook, I said, hey, let's go on a date. And we went to Journal Club. He's not in medicine, so that made it really interesting. And then we moved on in 2013, actually 2012, where I became the founding president for ADIM. I became a vice chair. The significance of giving the Hamilton Holmes speech at Emory, he was the first African-American man to be accepted into the School of Medicine. And from 2017 today, I became really laser focused on the conversation on equity and inclusion, how that links to wellness, the constructive culture we need, to what Adam mentioned today. So at the end of the day, you don't have to have it all figured out. I figured that out myself. I thought I had a plan. I thought I had a roadmap. I really didn't. I just stuck to my true north. And I determined and decided that for me to stay well and healthy, I had to do what mattered for me in a way that made sense. So connecting the dots on the journey for me, and I would invite you to consider it, this is my journey, but how does DEI, wellness and well-being, mentorship and leadership, you all are getting ready to go out and you all are already leaders as third-year residents. Everyone in here is a leader, whether we want to have a title or not. People look up to us in the community, in the places of we work. How do we develop in those spaces? And I always look at things with a lens towards the future. They're all intertwined in my journey, perhaps in yours. I would invite you to think about how that matters. So let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion first, which I find to be an interesting space, right? And I have a question mark next to diversity because, I'll just be honest with you. For me, diversity is not the real thing, right? I mean, we're all diverse. There is no other Adam. There is no other Tyler. I don't care what you look like, who you are. There's no other human, even if you have a twin. There's nobody on the planet that is who you are and what you look like. So diversity to me is somewhat of a maybe, misnomer in the sense that people anchor it around the wrong things, which are differences versus what makes us the same. I do appreciate and understand the historical lens around racial ethnic diversity in academic medicine. We published a paper to discuss how far we have come, particularly the way I started as the first African-American woman, like I mentioned at Emory. How do we look as a community of EM physicians as it relates to the population that we serve, right? And so when we started to look at these questions, we determined and decided, we've come somewhat far, but we have some steps for the future. And it really is grounded in all of us understanding and appreciating the historical constructs for where we got here. And where we got here can be grounded in where we need to go next, right? Do we measure and look at DEI? Do we consider holistic review, like I know Adam and I talked about before? Do we have a plan in place to address this that is measurable and tangible? These are some of the things that we need to think about as we consider this work. And when I started, and for some of us who are, I put in air quotes, marginalized group, I'm not a fan of that, but it is, the language that we use. Questions always come up of, do I belong here, right? I mean, I asked myself when I arrived at Emory, I said, do I really belong here? I don't see anyone here that looks like me. However, I had a leader who trusted me and gave me an opportunity to use my voice and to think about what I can bring to the narrative at Emory. And so y'all ever remember this movie, Encanto? Yes? Okay. Oh, everybody said yes. Tell me about Encanto. You said yes. And tell me your name, I'm sorry.
Helen.
Hi, Helen. So what do you know about Encanto?
So it is the story of a family in Colombia who are gifted with a magical blessing by Kendall, but the main character did not receive a blessing. So she goes on a journey to protect her family, and it turns out that she was the blessed column.
Well done. We're going to get along. We're gonna get along just fine. And so little Antonio, who's one of the characters, this actually came out on Good Morning America when this film came out because he actually saw someone who looked like him, and it went viral, and he says, oh my God, I feel seen. I feel that I can look like the Little Mermaid today, right? It has gone and given young people, young Black and brown people, opportunities to be who they see. And so this was really an aha moment for me, and I love the movie, and I'm not a Disney person per se, but this really spoke to me in the way it did because I felt seen. And this came out in Grady. If you look at the date, it was 2019, not that long ago. I look like a physician. Now, I had a little bit of a head scratch because, 2019 Black History Month, I was like, yes! And I was like, yes. Right? Because history usually means you're dead or old, at least, maybe. And I was struck by the fact, and I hope some of you are too, that in 2019, I was considered to be, making history, coming in as the first Black woman here. And I talk about my story saying, I wasn't accepted to medical school on my first attempt. I worked, I did all these things. I wasn't necessarily in the bucket of what would one consider, the top candidate. But I was able to make my mark and then really call the attention to implicit bias. And so that was a true moment and historical moment when I published this first paper, back in 2001. 22 years ago, Dr. Leon Haley, God rest his soul, he died tragically a year and a half ago on a jet ski. He was the dean at the University of Florida in Gainesville and one of the CEOs. We decided when we got to Emory, because he came about a little bit 9 months after I did in January of 1997, to write a paper because he became a true luminary. You remember him, I'm sure, those who know him, in this work. And we were really vested in trying to look at how we could make ourselves better at Emory and do the things that are necessary to advance in the DEI work. So that's when I got my toe into publishing and started publishing more. I had an MPH. How does racial and ethnic disparities impact us from a public health disparity? Pushing out Council of Residency directors to think about how do we promote DEI back in 2008, and then how do we expand the horizon by looking at our curriculum and what's a part of our curriculum to disseminate these strategies around cultural competency. And there was a sense of urgency for us as we saw the proliferation in terms of Atlanta and particularly in the nation, where the population is becoming more multicultural. And then I had to ask myself, while I was anchored in the lens of diversity, was I really being inclusive? And inclusivity to me means the intersection across all the things that make us who we are. Things that we see, things that we don't. You see that I'm a woman of color. I've shared with you my cultural background. I sort of shared with you my religious background, my gender identity, but there are parts of me that I did not see. There are parts of people in our communities we don't see. And I realized I needed to expand my lens, particularly around publications related to our LGBT population. And we realized very quickly that this was an underserved population, and what we learned and how we developed the work I had an uncle who tragically died of HIV/AIDS. He was a closeted gay man, a black gay man in New York. And it really, again, I am moved by things that have impacted me personally. And I speak of him and honor him because of his life at a time where I watched him not being cared for because of his HIV status. And quite frankly, I had to choose and anchored in my faith where family members opted not to visit and or feed him and or put trays of food on the floor, which I witnessed in my uncle's care at the hospital. I get it. It was in the 80s. People did not know what the disease was about, but it really spurred me to think about the humanity in which we treat people and the attitudes and behaviors of how we treat our LGBT residents who are caring for our patients, culminating in a textbook that I wrote in 2016, co-edited with Marcus Martin. Marcus Martin, a luminary in emergency medicine. We talked about his story, our story, and then this paper, which interestingly enough, we published in 2019, which is right at the time on UVA campus where Heather Heyer was murdered because of the alt-right uprising that happened. And when Marcus Martin and I and Lisa Moreno Walton walked the spaces where Ms. Heyer was murdered, it was really a sense of urgency for me to really get the message out and get the word out. But this links to what has been happening for decades. If you think about this publication, Crossing the Quality Chasm in 2001, we talk about this link to equitable care. So this is not a new conversation. There's a lot of energy around it now, but this has been talked about for more than 2 decades, and we are all working with individuals from different walks of life. We now have quality officers now, and equitable care is when quality, right? It does not vary. It's consistent, it's persistent, it does not matter your demographic background, your ethnicity, your gender, your socioeconomic status. Several years later, in 2003, we have bias, stereotyping, and prejudice, clinical uncertainty, right? That contributes to racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. And interestingly enough, this paper that looked at this 20 years later, where everyone is talking about quality care and quality improvement, have we made any difference? And the short answer is not really, because we had not and we have not, although we are getting there, measuring the outcomes we're looking for in terms of now we are putting things in the medical record, we're updating EPIC. You know, are we engaging the community's perspectives? Are we looking at community organizations? And the barriers and the elephant in the room always underscores the impact of racism and discrimination. How are we paying attention to or not the social determinants of health? Where is the data? Where is the trust? And so in my perspective, in the work I've done over the years, health equity is really the ethical and human rights, the principle that should motivate us to eliminate these health disparities so that all people from all walks can live the best life that they can. And it comes down to, health disparities and health equity, meaning justice. The 5th or 6th line in our United States Constitution really speaks towards justice for all people. And when I resonate and think about that, I'm not a historian, but I did look it up. We have to continually, again, reflect on these constructs, these beginnings, these origins, to find what role we play. The heart of a commitment to addressing health disparities is really a commitment for all of us to achieve a more just society. So the link is really clear. It had become clear over these last 2 years, and it becomes clear when we talk about racism. And Kamara Jones, who is a colleague and a friend, we did Leadership Atlanta together, she really defines it well, and people don't understand what it means. We're not calling people racist. It's really about a system and a structure that really organizes oppression and disadvantages certain racial groups simply by how they look. And there are multiple layers of this racism, from the systemic structural policies and norms that exist to the interpersonal, personally mediated prejudice and discrimination, hence the laws that we have. The most egregious and painful is the internalized racism, where people who are from, air quotes, marginalized groups accept the negative messages that they are oft-time given. You're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you don't know how to do this work. well enough. And certainly when you think about racism and the murder of George Floyd and what we saw with COVID-19, there was an outcry of racism becoming a public health crisis. The AAMC issued a statement on this. I happen to work with the AAMC and in the Group on Diversity and Inclusion as their Southern Regional Rep. They also just put out another publication last week about the attack on the SCOTUS decision that's upcoming, where education around race and ethnicity and affirmative action are being assaulted. The AMA also talks about this, and there was a joint statement from the American Psychiatric Association and the National Medical Association, of which I'm a proud member, to really hold us all accountable for what this looks like. In my county of DeKalb County, one of our students, Jasmine, in partnership with a student from Morehouse, was able to get the officers to declare racism a public health crisis. Interestingly enough, Francis Collins, who just stepped down, he made a bold statement as it relates to research. And he states, as you see here, quote, "To those individuals in the biomedical research enterprise who have endured disadvantages due to structural racism, I am truly sorry." And you can see the rest there. I had the privilege of touring NIH last week in a leadership course that I am doing, and it is palpably felt the scientific direction in which they are trying to go as well. As a researcher, SAEM, bringing it closer to home, they are doing more work. Wendy Coates, who's now the president of SAEM, she and others wrote a concept paper to plan for DEI in how to thread it in their MedEd research course in a very real way. Commentary also published on how to dismantle it through the lens, particularly in residency. So for me, I ask the question as I read things and try to grow and learn. I always ask, so what am I doing? And so I will ask, what are you all doing, right? This is really what this is about. This is my lens, what's yours? And for me, I determined as an educator, to partner with Morehouse School of Medicine. They are our partner school in Atlanta. We published this paper where we were able to truly partner with them in terms of not just the publication, but getting their students matched into emergency medicine. And this was an incredible effort that has now spanned more than 2 decades, where we can leverage the partnerships with our HBCU and ensure the inclusivity. You can see the tick up there with a number of students there who matched into EM, a third of whom we were able to keep in our institution. And for me, when George Floyd was murdered and I saw the results of COVID-19, the disparities of where it came to, we published this paper. I was actually asked by the editor-in-chief to put something pen to paper, and I asked my colleagues to engage and look at this from a ecological lens. And this is where I would like you to reflect and think about where and in what space and place you can insert yourself to help us move this needle forward. If it's from an individual level, are we learning about racism in healthcare? Are we thinking about implicit bias education? Are we looking at how to dismantle and think about these ideologies that have been a part of our narrative? From the organizational level, are we working towards building workforce diversity? Are we advocating for opportunities that are truly equitable and learning at the organizational level? I see our dean here who is helping to move that space. And certainly in the community lens, how are we engaging with the community, bringing them to us in true partnership, not telling them, but inviting them and sharing with them. And certainly the policies that I have mentioned that comes from the highest level, specifically from our internal organizations that have looked at and helped us understand the value of holistic review and how do we really consider race-related research and dismantling some of the myths that are out there. So I took the opportunity, I said this to Adam, coming full circle, knowing what I've done, to look at what you all are doing. And I pulled this out of your value plan and value statements. And I know that these are iterative and they will be changing, but I was very struck by the 5 things you have there. And I would submit that the first 2 mentioned, patient care comes first, treat everyone as they want to be treated, should resonate with you, as I just mentioned, the opportunities you have to consider how bias and how anti-racism work could be key constructs in what you're doing. And so as you think about your strategic planning, I invite you to intersect some of those things that I already talked about as part of your narrative. So that was DEI, and moving into wellness and well-being. This is another area that I have passion about. And who is this human? Anyone? Thank you. Ooh, that made me a little nervous. Yes, this is our Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murphy. The QR code will take you to the report that he penned last year, came out from his office, on how to address health worker burnout. He built an advisory committee. The goal is to have a thriving healthcare workforce. And interestingly enough, when you look at some of the constructs of this, I just highlight some real key ones that link the DEI work to the wellness work, one of which is a diverse and empowered health workforce. The other is leadership commitment and organizational values, as is evidenced by my former chair, Art Kelman, certainly you, Adam, here, and a safe and inclusive environment so all people feel welcomed. I would say that the trunk of that, which is true, is around trust, because to get to where we want to get to in our true north, it has to be grounded in trust. And the roots of that are inclusive of all entities, whether it's the health care organizations, researchers for those who are here, the academic institutions of which we're all in, licensing and accredited bodies. We have to put the pieces together to move towards trust so we can really build an environment that is inclusive and engaging. These factors associated, again, with burnout among healthcare workers, if you think about this report, again, there are many links here that you can see. I won't read them all, but I will highlight one, for example, at the societal level. Structural racism and health inequities are key. Health misinformation is key. How do we destigmatize mental health stigma? We are at the end of Mental Health Awareness Month, for example. How do we think about discriminatory structures and practices that inform us on the organizational level? And certainly, what about our lack of culture of collaboration? Do we work together? Do we appreciate and understand the vulnerability of those individuals who may not be seen? And how do we ensure that laws that address harassment, violence, and discrimination are upheld? So, what about me? Again, we know that the impact on racism and health brings around new trauma. COVID-19 and racial injustice protests brought on new trauma. This article that was published in the Washington Post highlighted that. I will personally share that I myself, in that picture that Adam shared, was when I got COVID. And I recognized very quickly as a Black woman that despite my, who I look like, I had privilege because I work at Emory. And I was able to raise my hand and call and say, I think something's going on. I got ushered in, got my own bed. They missed my IV a couple times, but they needed, who's my ultrasound? The ultrasound, yeah, they missed my IVs. But I said I need some morphine, and don't read into that. I really did need morphine. I was in such severe chest pain, and they ushered me in, got me in a room, got me in that bed. I was like, wow. And then my boss, chair of radiology, I'm sitting there, I said, I need a CAT scan, I'm having a dissection, my blood pressure, checked both arms, and they settled down. And I said, well, this is what was going on. I really thought I was gonna die. And my husband had to be left out, it was a very real moment for me when they said, no, you can't come back to him. And I said, oh, this is weird. Suppose I die. That wouldn't be very cool. Did I say I loved him this morning? And so I said, this is privilege, right? So the chair of radiology, who also happened to be the chief diversity officer at the time, she comes in and she says, how you doing? I said, I'm not great. I'm waiting for my CAT scan. And she said, I can help with that. And all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, you are the chair. So I got whisked off, I got my CT scan, everything was negative. I was fine. And interestingly enough, she said, we don't know what's wrong with you. Maybe you're just a little stressed out. Then, don't tell women no, don't do that. I was not stressed out, I was in pain. And she said, well, maybe you just have a viral infection. The light bulb went on. I said, can y'all test me for COVID? True story. And they're like, wow, but you don't have, I said, but something's wrong, I don't know what it is, test me. Sure enough, I had COVID. I recognized very quickly the privilege of advocating for myself, of knowing what to do, really is something that not many of our patients who look like me have. And so you actually even talked about Racism on Healthcare Workers, and we published this paper, and it talked about how much of a tick-up that there was in Black and brown people who responded to the survey versus others who participated, and this was physicians, PAs, and staff of over 500 people. And I literally had to put on my right brain hat and write about what this meant for me, because part of my wellness journey, DEI, is about putting pen to paper. And I published this in Harvard Macy and talked about the Heron 8. And I don't know many of you, if not most of you, but I would suspect you have most, if not all of these. And it's very simple. We need 3 things, 5 communities, relevant even more in COVID. 3 things, meaning something to do, someone to love, something to look forward to. I call it hope. And the 5 communities are your communities of origin, creation, work, which is all of you, neighbors, and church, faith, whatever that may be. Most people don't even know their neighbors. I won't ask you if you know your neighbors, but many people don't know their neighbors today. I know my neighbors. They are from Scotland. They have keys to my home. I have all 8. I want you to do the math in your head. You don't have to raise your hand, but I would suspect you have most, if not all, of these 8 things. And I know this because you're sitting here looking very nice, and even though things may be rough on some days, I'm pretty confident that you have a lot of hope, you have something to do that's meaningful, you have communities that care for you, and you have something to look forward to. And so I ask this, and I ask our residents when they come in and want to talk with patients, and they say I have a difficult patient. They actually call it a Heron consult, because I don't, Angie knows, it's true. We need a Heron consult, and I said, sure, no problem. There are no difficult patients, they're just misunderstood. And I take that as part of what keeps me well. This paper also incidentally got published on July 13th, which happens to be my father's birthday. So I determined, again, to not just do this from the sort of wellness piece, but to publish this, right? I chair our wellness working group in the School of Medicine. I also looked from the lens of gender equity. All the people on this publication are women and or women of color. And we got together to talk about how do we respond to the well-being of our healthcare workers and learners during the COVID-19 pandemic, most of which includes diminishing isolation, getting together, ensuring that there are systems and processes in place. And so part of my journey in leading this is also helping women who, as we know, have a much lower range and ring in terms of academic promotion and leadership lens to be able to help them move towards promotion. So your lens in your strategic plan, I would submit, based on what I just talked about, is, teach and learn something new every day. Learn more about, which we had to in COVID. We had to learn how to make things work. We had to learn how to go to telehealth. We had to learn how to do Zoom. We had to learn all these things, and we had to look for a better way to do things every day. So you all are doing it. I just submit and invite you to keep doing it. This is your value statement, your plan. And then last but not least, I'll go to mentorship and leadership across academic medicine, my own growth with a lens towards the future. I will say to you that for me, it's been quite the journey, and you've seen it already. I won't go through that again. But what I will say, that leadership is about how we inspire people. I'm sure Dr. McNabney has inspired you. This lecture is named after him. He has, and he will continue to do that for time infinitum. Leadership is about empowering people, making sure their voices are heard, making sure they have seats at the table, diminishing the hierarchical realities that sometimes exist in our work, whether we're working with our staff or our academic health providers, our learners. How do we empower them to be their best selves? Have a shared vision for where you want to go as you continue your walk and as you continue to move forward. And I really encourage you to lead change. Nothing stays the same. Everything is about moving forward. And I actually published about this. I've learned this again from Arthur Kellerman. If you can think it, you can write about this. And I was able to partner with some very amazing people to think about creating this vision for education leadership. For me, it's simple, and people who know me can say, oh yeah, we know what Cheryl's visions are, but sometimes it helps to write it down. Put pen to paper, think about what your vision, mission, and core values are, because then you can walk towards that direction and you can be very clear of what you need to do to get there. So for my vision, it's simple. Vision statements should be short, sweet, and easily digestible. For me, it's just quality care inclusive of all people, for all people. The mission for me has become advancing DEI through engagement of key organizational stakeholders. I consider you all stakeholders. You invited me here to have a conversation. And my core values have been around personal and professional connections. Relationships matter, they inform who you are, and they will help you in your journey, and definitely in your leadership journey. And it really does come down to accountability. We have to be accountable for ourselves, our families, our colleagues, our patients. This is not trivial. And for me, the accountability grounded in emergency medicine is about a partnership. And I partner with many people across the country with intention to grow more, learn more, because until I close my eyes, I can always be a better human. And these partnerships are enormous, and the partnerships of a few pulling together the partnerships of the many I couldn't even imagine what an incredible space we would be in as a country and how we would move the needle in the direction we want to go as we think about the collective good of our humanity. So I always tell people, partner and partner well, and ensure that those partnerships will help feed your soul. So all of that, for me came down to a moment of reflection as I enter into this, I would say the third, who are the baseball people in here? Who are the basketball people? Any sports people? No people? Okay, y'all just, okay, no sports people. Oh, okay. All right, so basketball people? All right, so I'm in the third quarter of my life, give or take. Maybe the bottom of the fourth. Okay, maybe the top of the third, right? And some of y'all are in the first, maybe second quarter of your life, right? And you should always have moment of reflections to think about, okay, what quarter am I in? Nothing's promised, right? I'm hoping I got a few good ones left, but I don't know. You all work in the ED, you never know, right? You never know. So it's always good to look in the mirror and reflect on the quarter that you're in and determine, are you your best self? Or are you getting there, right? Because opportunities will come before you time and time and time and time and time again. I almost laugh and chuckle when you read my accolades, and I'm like, stop. Because I don't necessarily say, I'm gonna go do that, I'm gonna go do this, I'm gonna go do that. I am anchored by my true north to think about where I can insert myself to take what I have learned, the experiences that I have, and perhaps pass it on. And it was said once, that's why I said to basketball, but anyway, John Wooden, he's a Hall of Fame basketball coach, said, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare, right? So when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. So fast forward, here I am, a Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. I didn't prepare for that. There weren't even jobs like that back in the day. But what I did do was prepare for the lens of equity and inclusivity to think about wellness and well-being. So as these areas of foci became leadership opportunities, I was prepared. And it became something that I had a few aha moments on. And as you think about your opportunities, you are already preparing, right? You are already having the foundation to do what you want to do, what your true north is. Just don't lose sight of that. And I did not. And I've been afforded to lead where I am today, the Office of Equity and Inclusion at Emory School of Medicine, predicated and grounded on the work I got in emergency medicine. And interestingly enough, when I was talking with Adam, emergency medicine is an incredible, incredible specialty. Why? We think quickly, we do quickly. We work with all people, whether we want to or not. And when you think about how you can accelerate in whatever direction you want to go, whether it's a chief medical officer or a chief diversity officer or a quality officer or a dean, you can use your skill sets of an emergency medicine to leverage that reality. I will also say it works personally. My husband always tells me negotiate for the rental car. I'm really good. I always get an upgrade. And he said, how do you do that? I said, we talk to people, right? So use those skills, get that upgrade. And you will find that you can move the needle in ways that you are surprised about. The Office of Equity and Inclusion for me has now given me the opportunity to create things. And this is a link to our end of year report, where we are anchored around the history, right? Our actionable educational initiative, 4 pillars, the history of Emory, of Atlanta, of Grady, using that reality. Grady built like an ace during segregation, which has informed some of the inequities that we've seen. implicit bias education, bystander, upstander. If you see something, how do you respond appropriately? And certainly on anti-racism. We have an incredible team, incredible group of people, and we continue to do the work. We just celebrated our second Diversity and Inclusion Week 2 weeks ago, where we had many people come, culminating in a fun block party where we actually insert fun and wellness along the way. And, as I, wind down to the last few slides, I just want to anchor on the wellness piece and the voice piece, the leadership piece, the equity piece. I really talk about the Hair on 8. I just don't talk about it. I be about it. I take my 6 vacations a year. People are always stunned when I say that. But I take my 6 vacations a year because this is hard work. No one said emergency medicine, and no one believes emergency medicine is fun. When we see dead, dying people who come in who are at acute stages of extremis, nothing about that is a good time. We're meeting people at their most vulnerable state. It is incumbent on us to give them our best selves. So I talk about the power of the P's. I published this in SAEM when I was entering into leadership, because people asked me, how do I do what I do? And I talk about my philosophy, my purpose, my passion, my willingness to pause if I need to. When you're about to just go you want to step back and just pause to check your pulse and prioritize what's most important to you. And only you know that. I don't know that, but you need to know that so you can recognize the privilege that you have and the partners that you have, all grounded in patience and, for me, prayer. So connecting all these dots of DEI, wellness, well-being, mentorship, and leadership, I hope made sense. It certainly makes sense in my journey. I am grateful for it. I would do it again if I had the opportunity. And I will close by saying, across academic medicine, just last week, I got this so-called Legacy Award from SAEM, ADIEM. I bring that, forward because I didn't expect to get the award. Again, legacy suggests you're either old or close to the end. And I would suggest I'm not. However, I flew into Austin for a day. It was during Diversity Week, and came back and was talked about how I got this big award, and it's amazing, and it's all great. And I talked about emergency medicine also getting the award at Emory. But the most important thing that really tied it all together was this tweet. This tweet went out, and it really touched my heart, right? So this is Dr. Sanche Mabin. She gave me permission to share this, and she tweeted it, so I guess it's public. And I really did meet her on the beach in St. Croix. So I do take my 6 vacations. So I met her on the beach in St. Croix in 2009. Why? Because St. Croix is where my husband was raised. He was born in St. Lucia. So again, Partner Wells. So that's where I met my family, in St. Lucia and St. Croix. We go every year. And he said, "Oh, my wife's a doctor." And I said, "Babe, we're on vacation. Stop." And he goes, "No." And no. And so she came up to me and said, "Mr. Boniface said you're a doctor." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm on vacation, drinking my pina colada." And she said, "Well, I want to be a doctor." I said, "Okay. Well, sure. Here's my email." And she emailed me, and we talked. And then she said, "Oh, Dr. Aaron, I got a med school." I said, "Really? Okay. Let me know what you're doing." She said, "You're an ER doctor, right? You know how to have fun. I want to do just like what you do, because you have fun, you're on the beach." I said, "Hey, sure." So she emailed me, and then she came up to me at SAEM. Literally, this was 2 weeks ago, as an emergency medicine physician, finishing up training in Chicago in her 3rd year, about to graduate, and she posted this on tweeted it. So I said, if you don't know that wellness, DEI, and leadership can work, this is the example. And this is one that I will always treasure. So have fun, enjoy the work. It is laborious, but it can yield great results, both for you, your patients, and your family. And, in summary, just understand, the link that we all have, or we could have, around DE&S, wellness, well-being, and leadership. Invite you to think about the 2 strategies. Look at your strategic plan. Adam, I'm sure, will share it with you, to advance equity and inclusion. And finally, find your true north and stick to it, right? Only you know what that looks like. Only you know how that will evolve, and you should be proud of what you're doing. So pulling it all together, I would like to say we do this together. People say to me, well, Cheryl, you did. I said, it's not Cheryl's work, it's our work. Legacy is not about the past, it's really about the future, because that was the past. That was the past. Yeah, that's the past. Yeah, that was the past, right? That was, whew. So if we anchored in the past, we might be in a little trouble. But this is the future, right? This is the future. So if you think, sorry, Adam, I didn't ask you. I just took it. Don't worry about that. I never said. You never ask people their sources. That's rule number one, right? So I almost put the pain one, but I spared you that one. So it's about the past and more importantly, the future. With that, I just want to say the journey continues. I will be on the beach literally on June 28th, back in St. Lucia to continue my 6 vacations a year. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for listening. You could be anywhere else, and I don't take it for granted. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for that inspiring and thoughtful.
He's trying to put me up with the picture.
Are there particular hurdles that seem to come up on a common,
Yes.
that you have to address, and what do you do about those, or what are?
Right. So for those online, the question was, we're looking at the ceiling. All right. Sorry.
She's back.
Oh, she's back. Oh, okay. That was me. I'm sorry. The question was about hurdles and how do you address it. So when you start to live long enough on the planet, you realize that the hurdles are just little bumps, right? It's like the serenity prayer, right? Sometimes you have to accept the things you cannot change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so when the hurdles come up, I ask myself always, what is the goal for my journey in life for however long I have it, right? And if this hurdle, I never believe a hurdle will detract me from it. It just may, one of my P's make me pivot, right? That's a good P, right? Because sometimes you just have to pivot for your mental health and your sanity to be able to continue to be your best self, right? And the way you do that, for me, I just pause, I step back, and I start to say, how do I really need this, right? How much is this going to impact my peace, another P, right? And my sanity, right? And when those bumps come, I always find that it was a lesson learned. It was something that I can build upon to maybe go to the direction I'm supposed to go to. So I look at it as, it's not that I'm Pollyanna all day long. I mean, I go, like, this is really not a good time, but I anchor in my faith, honestly. I was sharing with Adam, I'll share with you all here. My parents died a week apart, November 21st. I can now speak about it without becoming a blithering idiot. Around Thanksgiving, and Leon Haley died in 2021. So 2021 was not going well at all, right? And after I got through and I accept pain, because sometimes we just say, I don't feel that way. And I'm like, no, I'm just not really good right now, like at all. And you check out when you need to check out. And I also realized my parents were married 60 years, which is about 10 marriages in these days. And they anchored me in a way that I am good. I wasn't good, for the record, because they died like right around Thanksgiving. It was a nightmare. It was a mess. But I was able to reflect on, so I do take thousands of pictures. So as you, Exhibit A, you may be finding yourself in a photograph. So I ask your permission. I literally have about 40,000 pictures in my, no judgment, in my phone, because I need to anchor on the values for me. Are you going to pay me back? Is this what's happening? I think something's going on right there. And so that's how I do it. And I find that the pictures and the things that I reflect on, while the bumps may be there, that far overshadows those bumps. Long answer to a short question, but that's what I do. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
So you mentioned structural racism.
And obviously, there's lots of talk about that, pro, con, and every which way. Having read a little bit and certainly heard on radio and talk shows and whatnot, it's kind of easy to see how that's true, kind of big picture wise, but I have a hard time, please don't laugh, seeing it in the hospital. And so I know we all have biases, but like in the ER, as you say, we see everybody and we try to do our best, I think, to not have biases, and we are at least aware of them. But for the organization, I have a harder time seeing it. I believe it's probably there, but I'm too close to it. So I wonder if you could
Yes.
point out some issues that I'm missing.
Well, I don't know your institution in particular, but I'll speak about mine, and you are welcome. You have an expert here. Does everybody know your institution? Do they know you?
Cool. Hi, everyone. Dr. Tyler Smith, the Associate Dean of Diversity and Inclusion here at UMKC School.
Y'all know Dr. Thompson? Yes, great. So, structurally, we look at policies and procedures. I'll use Emory, for example, when you look at leadership, right? I looked at your walls. Y'all are doing pretty good on gender leadership. I was actually pretty impressed with the number of women in leadership. But when you look at the data around chairs and other people from underrepresented groups, it's pretty abysmal, right? So what policies are in place to address that on that level? And I can go back to the slide that we talked about in the organizational level. How are people included? And it's hard to see when you're seen, right? And you're right, it's difficult for, if you're a white, male, cisgendered, tall, Christian, you get the card. I'm just saying. I mean, you get the card. All the other demographics, and I'm literally trying to navigate something at my own hospital, I won't out us, but where underrepresented people are just left out. And it's not, I don't believe, purposeful. That's the walk I'm looking at. But when you are in the lens and saying, I don't see it, sometimes you may have to ask other people who are in the non-quote dominant group, what do they see, right? And the only way you'll know that is if you invite them to the table. And the only way they'll share it is if they feel psychologically safe to do so without retaliation. So it's really about creating an environment of openness and dialogue and discussion and looking at policies that say, when I look at this, and EM is a little different because we do see everyone that comes in the door, but what about the metrics and the outcomes for the patients that are being cared for? Do you look at the quality metrics related to that? How does that measure, right? How does that compare? Are we using language that's inviting and inclusive, right? Because we've been doing things, remember, historically medicine was on a 70-kilogram white man, right? That was how we were all sort of trained, at least back in my day. And we're now looking at ways to dismantle GFR as it's related to race, and so there is movement, but there also needs to be education around that movement. At Emory, our construct, when we look at our strategic planning, it's awareness, learning and growing, inclusive culture and climate, community engagement, and grounded in research and innovation. And I can tell you that when we look at the diversity engagement survey and we look at the data, all comers, I will share, it says that Black and brown people and women score two standard deviations below 20 out of 22 of those markers, right? So we know we have work to do, and then we do, in addition to qualitative, there's quantitative and qualitative analysis where you invite people to share and speak about what they see and look at some of these policies and procedures and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not sure I see myself. I'm not sure that these things are making sense for me. You look at what happened with COVID vaccination and what the Surgeon General talks about, it's truly around the trust piece. And trust is really a hard nut to crack. It just is. And it will be that way for a very long time. the good news is we got these fine folks graduating who can help us do better, be better. People like to use the term allyship. I like accomplice better because accomplice is a more actionable. You can be an ally and say, an accomplice steps up and steps in to help. When you look at the fatigue, it's tough for people who are in. I'm surprised nobody asked me how am I staying afloat in this work. I usually get that question. Like, how do you do this for 26 years? So I'll just answer my own question. Yeah, I do it, because when I think about my own growth and learning, and again, in addition to Martin Luther King, I have John Lewis, and I have others who have sacrificed, and my parents. My parents came here in 1968. They were solid middle class, but they encountered so many things. I do it for that. And I do it again. Legacy is not about the past, it's about the future for me. So, if we don't see it, but our data demonstrates that outcomes are not equitably demonstrating quality care or equitably showing women or those who are in underrepresented groups being seen, then Houston, we have a problem. And it's incumbent on us to engage the people. It's sort of restorative justice for some of this work where, again, at Emory, I'll give another story. Dr. Gerald Hood was denied entry to Emory Medical School in 1959. His letter of rejection, did y'all see that? His letter of rejection went viral on Twitter. It said, "We're sorry to inform you you weren't being accepted to Emory Medical School, and we're sending you your $5 back." Now, Dr. Gerald Hood is a black man. He applied to Emory in 1959. What was the problem? What was happening in 1959? That's why history is important. What was happening? Segregation, right? So even if he wanted to go to Emory, he couldn't. It was 1959. Dr. Hood is still alive, okay? This was Emory University School of Medicine. It went viral. My good friend, Dr. Yolanda Hood, who's the Chief Health Equity Officer, said, "Sure, this letter is viral." I said, "I know it's viral because part of our awareness learning and growing is we put the letter in a historical account of the black experience at Emory, and we put the letter in there. It is what it is, no shade. I mean, we're not going to hide nothing. It's like people don't want to teach history. If it's history, it's history. I mean, come on. Why are we not going to say that there was slavery and all? I mean, it's anyway. So I said, we put it in there. So she said, well, it's viral on Twitter, and Dr. Hood. And I said, Dr. Hood, you know him? She goes, yeah, I work with him. So my first question, which was not graceful, I said, he's still alive? It wasn't a graceful question. But I did ask her, and she goes, yeah, I still work with him. So talk about joy. And so, ER doctor, right? What do you say next? I want to talk to him. Yeah. Well, that's what I said. Anyway, I don't know what you would say, but I said, I want to talk to him. And she said, you want to talk to him? I said, yeah, I want to talk to him. I mean, And so she said, okay. So then I was like, oh my God. So he'll talk to me. I said, really? Then I was like, oh my God. So he calls me, calls me little Dr. Cheryl. I said, hi, Dr. Heron and Dr. Hood, I heard about this. I'd just like to hear what happened. And he said, well, little Dr. Cheryl, this is what happened. Somebody over at Emory came over to Clark to get an honorary degree. And I felt that if he could come from Emory to Clark to get an honorary degree, I could apply to Emory to go to Emory School of Medicine. I knew I wasn't going to get into Emory School of Medicine. It was in segregation. I was being Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. I was stunned that he knew who that was. And I said, really? He said, yes. And he said, and furthermore, the letter of rejection is not my story. I knew I wasn't going to get into Emory. I said, well, Doc, I didn't get into medical school the first time either. I got into Howard. He said, well, Dr. Scholl, they didn't accept me either. You must be really smart. I was like, oh, wow, okay. So we had an hour-and-a-half conversation, and his story about the letter was really to make a point and to try to raise awareness, and his story was stolen from him because he was with friends. He keeps the letter to encourage other black students to consider medical despite obstacles and bumps. And he applied and he applied. And he went actually to Howard for a year to do his master's, and then he got accepted to medical school in Rochester. The rest of the story is Georgia helped actually subsidize his education for him to go to medical school. But nobody gets that story because it doesn't sell newspapers, right? Here's Emory, the little, lily white school elitist, yada, yada, yada. That sells paper. So I said, Dr. Hood, that is unconscionable. We got to tell your story. So he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, why don't we talk about it on Juneteenth? I said, it's a good time. We can get it done. Meanwhile, back home, the president, FEMVES, and the dean and all this stuff were trying to get to Dr. Hood to try to figure out, because everybody was chagrined and embarrassed about this letter that had over 300,000 looks on Twitter. It was madness. So I said, well, I talked to Dr. Hood. And they're like, you? I said, well, how did you talk to him? I said, I called him. It's funny. It's really funny. And so they said, you called him? I said, yeah, They said, okay, you do the story. So you can look it up. We published it. We interviewed him. It's now on our website. Dr. Hood, the rest of his story. AAMC picked it up. New York Times picked it up. Atlanta Journal. Don Lemon picked it up. The point of the matter is his story, and this is why we anchor history as part of the narrative, where we expect people to understand and appreciate how we got here in Atlanta, right? So every place has their own history. But it's important to know that, so that, because he's still alive. He's actually still practicing, not my jam. He's in his 80s. I was like, sure, I'm going to be on the beach. But he's still practicing, and he is a part of living history. I was alive when Martin Luther King was assassinated, living history. So we can't lose sight of the impact of that history on where we are today. Even if we don't see it, it is there for our Native indigenous people, for our Latinx people, our LGBT. I mean, it is there. And so my ask is to be conscious. I come from Jamaica. That is one of the most homophobic countries in the world. And I can say that because it is. That said, though, I had to learn and understand and appreciate that lens, right? And how that informed my uncle, who died of AIDS because he was gay, and people, it wasn't accepted. And so I had to do my personal growth and learning to understand so I could be better and take care of humans like how I want to take care of people, right? So this is not oh, good, we had a McNabney, that could be good. No, this is a journey of continued growth, of continued exploration. We are inquisitive humans. I am also, again, a realist. I don't expect this to change in my lifetime. It took 400 plus years to get here. It's going to take a little longer to get out. We're moving in the right direction. I am confident, though, and at peace, knowing I'm just putting down a brick for the future. That's it. And I'm good with that. I'm not here to, I'm good with that. Question? You have that look.
I just thought it was a lot of bricks that you put down.
Yeah, thank you. I just say thank you. Yes?
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. One question that I have for you is that you've been doing a lot of work about diversity, equity, inclusion before there was titles for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
So how were you able to get people to, for lack of better terms, get it, to understand the importance of what you were discussing and talking about? Because there were probably people who said, oh, I don't understand what you're talking about, or oh, that's not important, or oh, we all see everyone the same, or I don't see color, or I don't see this. So how were you able to get people to get it?
So that's a great question, and it's sort of like this is an enigma, right? So part of it is, I'll just start with leadership. I've published this before, right? Art Kellerman, who was our founding chair, he would open the doors, and he got it, right? And he was able to say, and I shared with Adam, when we became a department in 1999, we talked about this at lunch. It was him and Philip Shane, my buddy, two nice looking, fit the profile, tall, white, straight men, right? Good, So that first year they got 15 men, one of whom was black and one woman in a class of 16. Arthur Kellerman was horrified. He was like, oh my God, we can't do this, we can't that. Cheryl, I need you to, and I was an assistant rep. Cheryl, I need you to stand up there. Visibility leadership, right? I said, well, what do you want me to do? You want the black, the Jamaican, the New Yorker? Which representative? And he said, no, I want all of that. I said, okay, I'm a little extra, you know, and I got a lot going on, you know, I'm very passionate. And he said, no, I want that, and I want all of that. I didn't have to change myself, right? As you see, I wear dreads. Back then I had braids. I didn't have to change myself. Interestingly, when I went to Atlanta for a job, black and white people said, you're gonna take your braids out, right? And I was like, oh my God, what's happening now? What's going on? They're like, well, you don't really, I'm like, I don't really what? And then they said, well, you know, and I said, well, ouch. No, I'm not gonna take my braids out. So, you know, I went down there and I had a leader who saw me. He saw me, I was seeing, right? So I give him a lot of credit for seeing me. Then when I got into position, I stood up there, Angie knows, right? I would talk about it. It's interesting, people say, well, can you tell me your policies, your procedures, your practices? Can you write it all down? I said, I don't have none of that. All I did was treat people. They come in my office, we sit down, I make them look at Grady and say, listen, this is the deal, this is what we're getting into. I play music in the middle of interview season. And Arthur Kelman said, what are you doing? I said, I gotta play music. People are constipated, I gotta get people loosened up. so I could see if I wanna work with them and if they wanna work with patients, right? So I was able to do it because I was able to then, you know, pull in and see and demonstrate the beauty of diversity and different thoughts and thinking. Because he said, I don't really understand why you want to play music. I don't like it, but you can do it. I said, really? I said, I got pop, reggae, you know, R&B, all of that, right? And he said, okay. So I pulled out my CD and we came to WEMORY during interview season and put on the music. And while they were waiting, I'd look to see who I wanted to work with, right? Because you know, you can tell people how they vibe, right? And you need people who can work with people. And it's not introvert versus extrovert. If you're like in a corner, screw face, not interested, can't work for me, right? Because I push patients, change patients, I do this, and I tell them, this is what we are, sleeves up. Angie knows it's true. And I would ask questions, and people would ask me, was that an interview? I said, yeah, I got everything I need, I'm good. And we were able to get the buy-in, and it's sort of like the tipping point. Once you get past a certain number, it became like, oh, we gotta go at least see Emory, even if we don't go there. And we created a culture first, right? So everybody's like, oh, we need policies, procedures, but that means nothing if you don't have the right culture. And I use the term culture to mean what you define it to be, which is, for us, inclusivity, joy, leadership, all of these things. At one point in Emory's career, we had every leader in every organization. I was president of NMA, Arthur was on ASAP, Philip was president of CORE, Douglas was, you know, and that was what it was. And that is what fed us, right, to be our best selves. The buy-in came from the fact that people saw results, right? And we published, right? Because Arthur said, he was my true north. He said, Cheryl, all that's good, this is happening for years, you gotta write. You gotta write. And I was like, man, come on, man, I'm not a writer, I'm not been. He goes, no, you gotta write. What are you thinking, right? And write about it. Write about our program. Write about what you do as a residency leader. Write about what you're thinking about LGBTQ. Write about what you want to put in your textbook. Write about your, so he said, write, right? And as you write, it becomes evident to the world. It becomes evident to you. It feeds you, and people want to be like, man, and then we're nice. We're not like assholes on top of it. I mean, if we were like just really horrible humans on top of that, they really want to hate us, but they can't because we're really nice people. And oh my God, it's EM, well, Jesus, here we go. But they're just such nice people. They take care of me, and they call us when they got somebody coming in. You know, you get the card, right? They call us. And I always respond, hey, what do you need? You good? How can I help? And we don't do it for that. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And then we show that. Like one year I had all 3 black men going to emergency medicine. I was a dean of students. Now, yes, I was a little, probably maybe inappropriate guiding them to emergency medicine, but okay, you use what you got. So I said, you know, EM is good, this is great, here's why. And I'm not stopping anybody else from doing that, right? And let's be clear. I believe, with all my soul that at the end of the day, we all want to do good, have a good time, have fun. And if you show that to people, like Sanche, I was on the beach, she's like, oh, I want to do that, right? So we have the power to do that. And even with the naysayers, there's that bell curve that says there's just the rocks that's just never going to move. Those are not who you pay attention to. It's this bell curve in the middle of people who are kind of on the fence and trying to figure out, should I get in there, should I not? So you demonstrate, you show, you use data. You bring forth the realities for the future. We're all going to be patients at the end of the day. So how does that going to impact you? What's in it for me? You want all of that for yourself, right? So I use that sort of lens to get people to, and even some of the hardest ones to crack, I see little snippets. And then now Emory is putting people in leadership spaces who are about the vision and the mission and the core values, right? And then people who aren't interested in that will leave, which is fine. I wish them luck, that's cool. Do your thing, not here, but go somewhere, And that's how we do it. And it takes time, right? 27 years I've been doing this work, and it's been, and then you got your ebbs and your flows, right? And so now I'm in the GDI space, and I have enough history to be able to bring to others who are struggling with how to get this done. And I will always say, don't do it at the expense of your own academic growth, right? So you can get very busy, sort of this black tax, minority tax, you can get very busy in the busy and not really pulling forth the academic currency of publications, grants, all those things to move you forward. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I know it is 5:30, y'all in between. Oh, yes, sir.
There was a question in the chat. I was just gonna mention that.
And what's your name? I'm sorry. What's your name?
I'm David Walker. I'm a PA faculty.
Oh, nice to meet you. Oh, in your opinion, what has been the most successful in promoting and encouraging a culture of physician wellness in your institution? Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. Oh, yes, we can talk about it at dinner. It's like a running joke. All jokes aside. Take your 6 vacations. It's going to be on my epitaph. It's going to be on my epitaph. But all jokes aside, I think part of encouraging a culture of physician wellness is to just sort of practice what you preach, right? So I do lead our wellness working group in the School of Medicine. I do participate on that level. And I, in addition to participating, actually do it. And I give permission for, like one of my staff members had, a horrible week and, I think had a death in the family, and she was so stressed out. She was making me stressed out, which was not cool. And I said, what is going on with you? And she said, I can't, I'm overwhelmed. I said, okay, give me your phone. I took her phone. I said, what's this meeting? Delete, 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 delete. Do we need to meet here? What are we talking about? Anything major? No, delete, delete, delete. So I literally took her phone and cleared her schedule for 2 days, right? That's deliberate action and leadership, okay? That meant I had to pick it up, but it was fine. I mean, most times, my brain works, I get up at 5 a.m., I do my Orange Theory, I do my thing. So my brain works really fast, and I can get a whole day's work done in probably 2 hours, right? I don't know if that's normal, but anyway, that I can do that. And so I know I can do that, and in my leadership courses I've been in, and I know we've been in, I look to the what's called Strengths Finders, if you're not familiar with it, because many of us spend a lot of time on the stuff we can't do well, which is a waste of time, right? It's a waste of time. So what you do well, you spend 90% of your time on that. I'm not saying you shouldn't learn the other stuff, but you find people, like I can't read a spreadsheet worth a damn, but I can lead, I say, hey, I just need, this is what I'm thinking, I'm the blue-green person, the high-eye person, so you gotta know who you are and all that kind of stuff. And I find people who can do that. And my staff is great, they're like, Cheryl, you wanna do what? I said, yeah, we're gonna get, Dr. Hood to, do things like that. We can't do that. I said, of course we can. But how are we gonna do that? I said, yeah, you figure that out. That's what I wanna do. You have to cultivate people's, who they are. That's part of the inclusivity piece. And don't try to make people into who they're not, right? Because when you do that, it just becomes contentious. It's no longer fun. right? It becomes, painful on many, many levels. So the wellness piece is really about, demonstrating it by doing it. When I go on vacation, they know they're, oh no, Dr. Harron takes 6 vacations. Yeah, I said, good, I don't even have to say it anymore, right? And she's off doing, but I'm not a slacker, don't read it. I'm not a slacker. I do my work and I handle my business. But there's also some skill sets like time management. There's some skill sets on how to prioritize what you're doing. There's some skill sets on how you say no. There's some skill sets on how you say no and I have someone else sponsor. There are ways to do this. You don't, and depends on where you are in the universe. So for me, I look at all those things. I'm at a different point in my career. I've said yes to a lot of things. I'm like, oh my God. But then I've said no lately because I get a lot. I did this for Adam.
To say thank you for.
I did this for Adam, really, So I have my people. I said no to Harvard, Yale, don't tell them. But I said no to Harvard, Yale, Princeton. I'm like, I don't know y'all. But Adam, we hang out, and he said, sure. I said, yeah, okay, I'll find time. I'll work it out. So I do what I do. No, it's all good. And it's, well, so and y'all gonna feed me well. So there's part of my 6 things I do well. So that's what it is. Dr. Is it Shrikala? Am I saying that right? Yeah. Shrikala. So you're gonna have to fight for the seat next to me because I promised Dr. Volkman that she that my seat. But again, so I'm sharon@emory.edu. I am a high responder in email. If you have any questions, I am absolutely willing to share and even offer. I help people think about, their own true north. It's so important, and the world needs it. The world needs all doctors to be their best self. Period. I mean, that's what's needed, especially today, where there's so much stress and anxiety and the last thing I will say is just give yourself permission. We don't like when my parents died. I said I just can't do this right now. And they're like, wow. And I'm like, man, that's vulnerable. I said, yeah, well, I can't. And so I'm asking, and when you are, I'm not saying you wear your heart on your sleeve, but when you are comfortable sharing what your needs are, surprisingly, but not surprisingly, people really respond to that. I tell people everybody gets a turn in life. Everybody gets a turn. And so I do my best when people ask. I say, yeah, I can help. And that's another culture that's built in. So you just do those things. And you'll find that while the journey, I tell my patients, everybody's on the train, right? You get on the train and you're on the train. Be careful who's in your car with you. Some people may need to get out. But you want the right people in your car, and then you're going to get off the train. That's a fact. So we're all on the train. When you're in the train, make sure the right people in the car with you. Some people need you. You could look at them and wave from a distance, and then you get off the train, right? So the journey should be one where, as best as you can, should be filled with the things that is demonstrative of who you are without apology. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So thank you for listening. I feel like I should. That's my next gig. I'm going writing. Adam, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you.
It'll all be good.
I'm from
Thank you. So I read all about you before your